This is the first time I've ever done a weed management seminar of any kind. I've had jobs of talking about weed control, so I had to go back all through my records to try to find how good our yields have been on our cucumber crop. Am I in the right crowd? Anyhow, it's been fun. I love everything about organic. It's all I've really ever known except for a few years of my life. I was raised on a farm that they didn't call it organic, but that's the way Dad farmed. He didn't use any herbicide or insecticide on the row crops. We used row crop cultivation, so I didn't expect it was supposed to be done any other way. And so for the first 14 years of my life, that's what I experienced. So you kind of get in your head that that's the way it's supposed to be done. You're not shocked when you think you're going to farm organically someday and not use the herbicides and insecticides. But when I was 14 years old, I started working off the farm because, a lot of times you think you're smarter than Dad until you're about 23, 24, 25, and then Dad starts getting smarter. And my dad did at that age because that's about the time I started going back into, I had my own operation then to transition to organic and take it from a conventional operation. But anyhow, I also started working off the farm with other farmers and learning what the real good farmers did, and that was the conventional guys that were using all the newfangled technology and the chemistry that was being used to control weeds. And one of my first jobs, I was 14 years old. It was a M Farmer International with a front boom on it with the 255-gallon barrels and the pump on the PTO, and it had the little shade on it, and I was spraying 2,4-D. And it was real hot, and that mist, that nice, cool mist to be coming up from that boom across the front of that tractor. I mean, that's living. Of course, back then, we felt like you could drink the stuff. It was harmless. It couldn't hurt you. And of course, it's amazing how things change and how the worm turns. But 1979, I got my opportunity to farm my first farm on my own. And it was a little over 1,000 acres, but 259 of it was bank managed. And back then, if somebody found out you were farming biological, we didn't call it organic, they wanted rid of you. And of course, I didn't want to farm anymore with chemistry. So the farm management firm on that 259 acres and myself had a parting of the ways. It was a mutual feeling. Every time I rotary hoed the crops over there, because I did use some of the same principles on the farm that was bank managed those first couple years when I was transitioning everything else to organic, I noticed my eyes would sting when I'd get dirt in them. And where I rotary hoed where it was organic or in transition, of course we didn't call it back then, my eyes didn't sting, they just felt like they had dirt in them. And I started realizing, and of course anytime we planted corn when I was working on those farms, we'd use counter insecticide no matter how far you got your head back from the box you were putting it in, and then the dust would come over the top of the tractor, and we didn't have cabs back then, not everybody, and so I'd be sick for a week. And so I over time it starts making me think, and I got introduced in 1979, 1980, some guys that were around, that came across from Iowa where they were farming on a biohumic agriculture production system. And that was my first introduction to farming what we'd call organic. Of course, all biohumic farmers are organic, but not all organic farmers are biohumic. There's a big difference. So that's my past and where I came from. In 2010, after being out of farming a few years, because my landlady passed away after I farmed that farm for about 12 years, 1979 to 1991. And so 1991 to 2010, I was in my own business as a headhunter. And 2010, I decided I went back in agriculture, and so I started shaking hands and kissing babies to see where my spot would be back in agriculture, and I wanted definitely organic agriculture. There is no other agriculture as far as I'm concerned. And the reason why I had a stint without farming is because there's no way, if I've got a farm with chemistry, was I going to go back into farming. I would get out, and then when 2010 come around, I run into a guy that had come to my field day back in the 90s, in the 80s, the late 80s, and he said there's a farm that's having a lot of trouble. There was 1,000 acres or so that was bought by investors, and it really had some tough years. And of course, the previous years to that, it was basically a weed patch. I mean, some years they didn't even plant a crop. They just let it grow up in weeds, And so anyhow, I met with him the 17th of March at about 9 o'clock in the morning on March 17th, 2010. And that's when my new career started. And I don't like the word management. I'm a farm worker. I work with the farmer. whatever that farm's got to have to be successful, I've got to improve the weed pressure to the point that the farmer's talent and skill will match that weed pressure. And so the talent is important and the tools are important that we use. And I'm very basic, I'm very old-fashioned. But if I can get this thing to advance here, it works. These were the 4 steps that I used, and I have never changed. I stay true to these steps, and it was called the Biohumic Agriculture Production System. And the first thing was promote life. See, I believe that productive soil is breaking America and the American farmer. And what do we talk about? Productive, productive, productive. Now for every $100 you spend, you get 80 back, you're losing 20. But you got a productive soil, but for who bought it? Who's the person that it's productive for? It's always productive for agribusiness. I'm more for having what I call a reproductive soil. As you get your soils reproductive, away from productive, your weeds will become easier and easier to control, and that is so vital. The whole catch in the deal is you've got to learn to be unselfishly greedy. I'm just as greedy as you are, but I'm going to get by giving instead of get by taking. We've taken and taken and taken from our soils for 400 years, and it's time that we change that if we're going to have successful farm operations that are sustainable for the long haul. So the first step is to promote life in the soil by stopping all use of anything injurious to the soil biology. And of course, we didn't have the regs back then. And I don't try to stay inside the regs. I want to be a maximum organic farmer, not a minimum. I'm not going to get just in underneath the USDA label and that's good enough. I'm not interested in that, okay? The second thing was to promote life in the soil by inoculating soil with beneficial bacteria. We know we've got yeast in the air. We know we can bake bread without yeast, we'll end up with a brickbat, about like the soil when it doesn't have any biology in it. We know if we add yeast when we bake bread, the bread will rise, and you'll have a loaf of bread when you bake it. And I work with the soil with the same mentality, that I want biology in that soil. Number 3 is promote life in the soil by using crop rotation to feed the bacteria and microbial life. This is where 99% of the organic people, I feel, miss it. Okay? If there was a farmer and he bought 100 head of calves weighing 400 pounds and he took them home and put them in a 40-acre dry lot, he let them have the water out of the pond in the corner of the field and he gave them free choice mineral, but he didn't feed them any hay or corn or anything, he figures, I'm going to save money. I don't want to put that back. That's my money. What would you consider that farmer? What would you call him? Short-sighted? Foolish? Maybe something a little stronger? If you're farming and you're not feeding the biology in the soil, what are you going to call yourself? The key to weed control is to be building your soil and adding carbon all the time. As long as you're subtracting from that account, you'll fight weeds, you'll fight weeds, and you'll fight weeds. Weeds are here to cover the soil. That's why your rolled rye, a process where there are no-till and soybeans and rolled rye, you cover that ground, you shade it. That's one reason why the weeds grow. It takes care of that reason. They remineralize the soil. If the soil is always being mined and mined and mined, it gets low on trace minerals. Weeds grow to replenish that. So they're supposed to grow. Until we take away the supposed to, we're going to have the weeds. And you can't do it with a soil test. The earthworm multiplies nitrogen 5 to 9 times from the soil it just ate. It multiplies the phosphorus 7 times from the soil it just ate. It multiplies the potash 11 times from the soil it just ate when it eats its way through the soil. It doesn't burrow, it eats, okay? Now, whenever the soil scientists of the day can figure out how that earthworm does that, I'll figure they're as smart as the earthworm as far as the soil scientist, okay? And I don't want to knock or put down any of the professional people that are working. To me, I view them as a doctor. If I can take care of my health by not smoking, not drinking, not chasing women, okay? I just threw that in there. That wasn't on my talk. If I can get the exercise and the sleep and everything I need, then I can stay away from the doctor as much as I can. My soil is an extension of me. I'm the biology that's a part of that soil. I'd like to think I'm the most important biology. I can be the most damning, or I can be the most beneficial. It's my responsibility to get that soil healthy again, to feed that soil, to be the caretaker of that soil. Okay, number 4, promote life in the soil by using shallow tillage to create a healthy environment for the aerobic soil bacteria and microbial life. I never work my soil deeper than about 3 inches. Anytime you put organic matter down farther than 3 inches, we were always taught by the farmers that I learned from that it putrefies. It gives the soil a stomach ache. And there's nothing that'll create more weed pressure than to cause your soil to have a stomach ache and to get out of balance, be sick, whatever, there's lots of terms for it. And so for many years now, I've had tremendous success with weed control on the farms that I've personally farmed by using this system. And I have to tell you, it's been such a thrill to me to farm and be in the organic system for many, many years now. And I don't know how that happened to you. I guess if you hang around long enough, you get there. But anyway, I want to make it so important for you to understand how important it is for you to learn the difference between a productive soil and a reproductive soil. We need to stop treating the symptoms and get back at the cause. When you've got weeds, that is a symptom. If your crop fails because of the weeds aren't the reason why your crop failed. It's a symptom. It's like taking your temperature. It's a symptom. And we need to treat it that way. And when we do, we'll have a lot less weed pressure. We want to get ultimately the weeds so that they're stage 1 weeds, I call them, where they're 1 inch tall, your crop's 4 inches tall, rather than weeds 4 inches tall and crops 4 inches tall. That's a tough nut to crack when you have that situation. And so for you guys that are new, starting out, you want to do everything in your power to give yourself the edge by keeping the weeds so they're not thriving on your soil, that your crop jumps out of the ground because you're going to use timely planting and other techniques. And we'll get to that. Okay, here's the rotation that I've used. Okay, and I really promote this rotation, but it may not fit you in your area and the crop mix that you want. Basically, it's a nitrogen user followed by a nitrogen fixer followed by a nitrogen user and so forth. But I want you to know that when I start in, and I'm transitioning some farms now because there's so many farms coming available, but there's nobody to farm them. You can't find a farmer. They talk about we got to save the planet. We need to save the American farmer. And there's 2 things that's going to really help, and that's marketing and weed control. When I'm starting out on a transitional farm, if it's in corn stalks, I'm going to start out with soybeans. If it's in soybeans, I'm going to start out with small grains. If it's in small grains, I'm going to start out with a legume grass mix. If it's in a legume grass mix, I'm going to go to corn on that acreage. I start right into the rotation right from the get-go when I'm farming and starting into transitioning land. Okay? It's important to understand the importance of that rotation. It breaks up the cycles of the insects, the funguses, and all the guys that can cause havoc. In all the years I farmed, I've never had a bigger parasite than what I had when I farmed conventionally and worked on the farms by the herbicide man, the chemical rep, and that's where the biggest parasite is, I've always felt, in agriculture. That's terrible, isn't it, to say something like that? But bugs are here to help the system. They're here, they're part of the system. We just need to learn how to be good stewards and work with them. I've never had anything that I would consider a loss because of cutworm, corn borer, earworm, or any of those. Here again, I don't treat symptoms. I try to always get back this. I'm going to treat any problem that I have on the farm the same way. I'm going to take care of the biology and feed the life in the soil, and it'll take care of those problems. Now, the cuckleburrs, I told you that I had some data on cuckleburrs as far as how to get the best yield. Tough crowd. When I came into this, you got to realize that my job is to come into a farm operation, and that's why I got the opportunity to take this. This is the first farm that I managed, or I worked with. You know, there's not much management. I rolled up my sleeves, and I got busy with the guy we hired to farm it. The landowner owns the machinery. He hired the man that we've got there working on the farm, but I worked toe-to-toe with him every day for the first 2 or 3 years to get this farm straightened around. It's 520 beautiful acres, 462 tillable. It was tiled at one time, but the people that first turned it organic wanted to be a grass-fed operation, and they ruined all the tiles by putting in waters on every 40 acres they cut across the tile lines. So that's worse than not having any tile when you have tile lines that are cut. So it's the best place in the world to raise organic alligators, but it's really tough raising row crops. But it's given me the opportunity to really get good at what I do. So anyhow, I don't know how much that these cuckoos would have made, but what my job is to clean them up. And I've had to customize a few cultivators, and the cultivator I use to clean this up is the very best technology. When the technology of mechanical weed control got to its peak, then all of a sudden they started dumbing down cultivators because we had chemistry. So we're talking about technology from the 40s when it comes to weed control and iron is superior to pretty much anything out there you see. Problem is, it's hard to find technology from the 40s and the 50s. Still, some of them were being sold and built in the 70s, but few. Okay? The cultivators of the more modern era, the Vibra-Shank International, the C-Shank John Deere, I can't think of the numbers on them. I think it's a 183 on the International. I think it's an 85 or something like that on the John Deere. Anyhow, those were designed for the farmer that was the new farmer that didn't want to get out of the tractor cab because cabs are getting air conditioned in. You went from the office into the tractor cab, didn't want to spend too much time in between, and we were getting a different lifestyle as farmers. And so there was not much adjustment. You hooked the cultivator up with a quick attach, and then you had the third link that tipped and that was about it. Okay? The cultivators I use, like on an 8-row, has close to 300 individual adjustments. Okay? If you like turning wrenches, you'll love this cultivator. Now, I'm not telling you what cultivator to use, but I want you to learn a principle here. That cultivator has to take care of the real estate in the row. Today, the new cultivators are designed to take care of the real estate between the rows and leave 8 inches untended to, because that was when they banned it on chemicals. They had the rolling fenders that protected crop for 8 inches, 4 inches on each side. And so the cultivators got away from the true art of cultivation. Farmers got away from the true art. My dad was somebody who cultivated when everybody else quit. And he's been dead now for 16 years. Fortunately, I learned and was able to bring that across, that great chasm of generations that never cultivated. Very few of them. My dad was a master when I was growing up. He didn't want to weed in the field. I'm just as crazy as he is. If we were going to the movies, if one of the children got guts enough to ask him if we could go to the movies, because Dad was a tough guy. He was a wonderful dad, but boy, he was tough. He always figured if you find a man down, kick him harder if he doesn't get up, and eventually he'll get up and you'll prove to him he's a winner. And and I think that's a great strategy, rather than say, oh, you poor little loser, here you go. You know, that wasn't my father. And I thank him for that. But anyway, now I'll lose my train of thought with that one. You weren't supposed to laugh. But anyhow, we'll move to the next slide. Maybe I'll think of what I was going to say. There's some more example of what I end up working with. Now, both these fields were good enough to harvest before frost and sell the beans as food grade. No weed stains and no dirt on the beans. Okay? And that, I've lowered my standard to be considered a success. Okay? When I was farming, if there was more weeds than I could personally pull myself on my operation by doing all the bean walking, it was a failure if I had to hire bean walkers. Okay? But this here is where it turns green before your crop even comes out of the ground. You've lost the game usually. But I've been doing this for 37 years, and of course I started working with running machinery when I was 5 years old. We didn't have OSHA back then. And I don't know how many of my brothers and sisters didn't make it, but Mom and Dad just had another one. There were 7 of us that made it, you know. And the smart ones made it. The ones that were careless or wasn't real sharp, they're out there somewhere. But anyhow, we learned how to do things, and we learned how to solve problems. And when I see a field like this, it's time to think about how you're going to row crop cultivate that. This is about a week or so or two. The beans are about that tall, and I finally got into it. And I've customized cultivators so they can go through stuff. Don't be afraid to get the welder and torch out. Don't be afraid to think. Right here is your magic, your secret in organic farming. You can't do the cookie cutter thing like you can with conventional. It's a turnkey deal. Okay? The marketing's turnkey, the weed control's turnkey, the fungicide's turnkey. You can hire somebody to scout your fields, and if you don't want them to, they don't even have to call you. They'll just spray it for you. You know, they'll send you the bill though. They usually don't miss that part. But the point I want to make is that this is a different game. It's an exciting game where we make a difference and we make an impact. Now let's see if the video works now, Anders. This is a video. This is a transition field, 2015, 40 acres that I transitioned myself. Now I guarantee you, if you went out there and walked around for 6 or 7 hours, you would find a weed, because there are weeds out there. This field was planted like the 3rd of June, and it rained for, 3 days after I planted it, it rained for 5 weeks, 24 inches. Never got rotary hoed, never got anything. But all the setup work previous to that, I do everything I can to set myself up so if disaster strikes, I can weather the storm. Okay? But that's what I want to end up with. That's what I expect every year. Okay? I don't want a weed out there. If you've got one weed an acre, it's got enough seeds to have a lot of weeds the next year. And this was conventional, Roundup probably 2 and 3 times a year. And I can guarantee you there's a little bit of a honeymoon sometimes when you start out on transitioning. Take advantage of it. Okay? Keep the fields clean. When you get a cucumber field like I showed you there earlier, and all those cucumbers, even if you get a good job of cultivating, there's enough to repopulate the cucumber population if you only leave one weed every 8 foot. Okay? And so take advantage of your opportunity. Seize the moment that you take over a conventional a field, maybe it's your own, okay? Keep it clean. And we'll be talking more about that here in a little bit, I hope, okay? Now, I believe in soil testing, but my soil test is a little bit different than what you consider a soil test. I go out with a spade, and if I'm working like this here was a hole I dug on a 70-acre field, a new one I'm transitioning for a bank management firm. I kind of feel bad now. We buried a few of them about behind the barn back when I was growing up because we didn't like farm bank managers back then. I'm working with a great guy now. I tell you, it makes me sorry that we ever treated the ones we used to have so badly. But, of course, that was many years ago, so I'm forgiven. But I dig one hole 1 foot by 1 foot square and 1 foot deep on every 10 acres. It, more than anything, it gets my head in the soil. You can take and get your soil test and take it out of the manila envelope and you can lay it out on your desk. Not one weed's going to grow from that sucker. Okay? Is that important? Yes. But what's important is you're the practitioner. The doctor needs that. You're the practitioner. What can you do to affect those numbers with your operation, with your operating skills? I've always said that the soil test should be a farmer test. If you're having to put a lot of elements on to maintain fertility, your soil is productive but not reproductive. Your hope should be that someday your soil is generating enough nutrients that you don't have to add anything. Okay? And that's what being a steward is all about, to make it sustainable. And when you get more towards that area, your weeds. My dad planted corn. He didn't rotary hoe. He didn't harrow. He cultivated and had cleanest crops in the country. The soils were different back then because they didn't have the stomach ache they got today. Okay? It's going to take a while to get them back. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Hopefully I'll get on that subject. But there were no earthworms in 7 holes 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot on this farm I'm starting out on. There was 1.25 on the 40 where you saw the soybeans. Okay? And every year, about the same day in the year, I go out and dig holes again. And I progress my growth. That, to me, does more for me and for knowing where the farm's going and what I need to affect that than a soil test. Okay? This is what I want that to look like. When you get holes in your soil, it lets the water go down. It lets the air get in the soil. You've got to have air. You've got to have water. More important than NP and K, but because nobody sells it, and nobody's making any money with it, guess what? Nobody wants to talk about that. But without air and water, your NPK is not going to do as much good for you. So it's important to have the right physics and the physical properties of the soil. So we need to keep working on that. How's that happen? Earthworms eat bacteria. If you're not feeding the biology in the soil, you're not going to have bacteria. If you don't have bacteria, you're not going to have earthworms. If you don't have earthworms, you're not going to have birds. You know, and on up the chain. And it's amazing to watch a farm, all of a sudden you don't ever see one bird landing on a field. I have that one, 520 acres, I drive an hour and 15 minutes to get to it. Don't see one bird on any field. But as soon as they get to that farm, there will be hundreds of them landing out in the field. Why? They know, okay? The other fields don't have anything they want to eat. There's just another picture, same thing. And then to start you out on the process of this whole situation, after I dig the holes, after I get my head in the soil, the next thing I'm going to do is start working on the biological properties of that soil. Like I said earlier, you can bake bread and wait for the yeast in the air to enter that bread so it'll rise, but you'll end up with a brick bat. It's better to infuse that bread recipe with yeast. And then you mix it all up, you let it rise, you punch it down, you're getting closer to getting it ready to bake it. The soil works the same way. You can work soil and it rains, and after a few days you go out and you dig it up and it'll start having those little pockets, little air pockets. If you look real close, it looks like Duncan Hines cakes. It's risen. You don't want it looking like fudge. If it's like fudge and stays there, you have no biology, you have no yeast, you have no life in it, okay? And however far down it goes, Duncan Hines cake, that's how deep your biology is in the soil. That's how deep your air is in the soil. Where it starts being fudge, you don't have it there, okay? And so we spray a biological inoculant. It's a biological product that breaks down the corn stalks because we want the nutrient cycles to start working. Here again, you're thinking, I thought he's going to talk about weed control. I am. Because I don't want you to have a field like those cucumber. I don't want you to have a field like that grass that was growing in that one field. But because I'm just working with a few acres, I went out and bought machinery, and so I'm the big farmer now. And but I bought a little notch blade plowing disc. It's an International 500, and head of it's a Model 27 John Deere shredder, flail shredder. And I want to make baby food out of those corn stalks. One of the best tools on an organic farm, in my opinion, is a flail shredder. The soil's not real healthy, not real robust, and I'm going to shred that up, make baby food out of it, and I'm going to work it in the top couple inches of soil. I want to create a firestorm in that top couple inches. Okay? I want to get the farm so that if I get tired and take a nap and lay down on the ground, I'll be half naked when I wake up. Whatever side I laid on is gone. Okay? You know, I kid Brian about that. He's farming his 520 acres. I says, you'll get to the point where I don't want you wearing any leather-soled shoes because you'll be barefoot time you get across the field. Okay? Now, I kid about this, but isn't this the kind of stuff we ought to be talking about? You know, this is exciting to work with a living soil. And those weeds are there to fix things. Let's fix them. Let's do the weeds' job so the weeds don't have to do it. Okay? And here, just again, it's just more of surface blending. Now, I've got a 100 horsepower old 1030 case on there, 1963. I did not buy it for this farm. I was rebuilding old cultivators, and I needed something big enough to lift a 12-foot toolbar, cultivator. And so I bought this old tractor for $4,000 or $5,000, and good enough for that. And then when I rented this 40 because I couldn't find anybody else to farm it, that's what I want. That's my main tractor now. See, so I have a lot of fun with my toys, and that's a 22-foot. International 490 disc with a 3-bar Remlinger harrow, and I'm sure that you know enough about horsepower that I'm not going into the spools with that disc. Okay? I'm just going in deep enough to chop and stir. Chop and stir. I want the biology. If you've ever taken out an old fence row and you pull up the fence post, the old hedge post, and if you got an end loader on, end-loader jumps because it breaks it off right at the surface of the soil or just right below, right in the top inch of soil is where the biology eats right through that hedge post. You dig around it with a spade and you put a chain around the little stub end that you can get to and you pull the rest of it out and it's still got the bark on it. Still got the bark on it. When it was probably put in the ground maybe 50 years ago, still got bark on it. And we were always taught that changed the stuff in that you put below the aerobic layer into formaldehyde, methane, and other things that weren't good for the soil. So we wanted to keep the biology fed where it's aerobic. Okay, here's just another picture of it kind of a week later, and it's been rained on, and the soil's probably risen again, and then we're preparing it more for getting closer to planting. There we got our seed bed made, we're going to plant. Now, weed control and planting. First, I wanted to make a point here. If I've got an acreage somewhere, I don't care how far it is away, I'm not going to go over there and say, well, let's go over there and plant that field and go over there and work it however many times you need to work it and plant it. I'm going to go work it. I'm going to leave it alone. Okay? I'm going to let it raise. You kill a crop of weeds. Maybe you don't even see them, but the weed seeds have burst open. You go over and work it again then. And so each operation I try to space some time between. Now, I don't live in Wisconsin. Okay? Winter gets over in June 31st, and winter starts September 1st. Different story up here, except this year. Okay? But in Illinois, we have the luxury to kill 2 crops minimum of weeds. The first flush is the hottest, the second flush is less hot, and so forth. By the third flush, if you kill the third one and then plant, you've got the worst weeds out of the way, the hottest ones, the ones that will cause you to have stage 3 and stage 4 weeds that are 3/4 the size of your crop or the same size as your crop. You'll get it so you can whip them with your row crop cultivator. Now the planter, I planted the field, it's been planted north and south for years. I planted east and west. That's why you see the little spots where it's moisture. When I plant, I'm going to plant corn a minimum of 2.5 inches deep. I'm going to plant everything into moisture. I don't plant in dry dirt and pray for rain. I want that seed to immediately take on moisture and start growing. I did have some sides that I showed in one presentation where each hour of the plant and where it was, you know, and this here field of soybeans, in less than 4 days, they were up 1.5 inches, 2 inches tall. I intend to row on the 4th day, and I intend to be able to row that crop. That is so vital to weed control. The weeds are in a dead heat. They're in a race against time with those weeds. You want them out of the ground so they can start spreading their allelopathic effect to protect their territory. We got to give them half a chance. And so that is so vital. So I also use, this is the first time I ever used it, a seed treatment that was humic acid on the seed. I used some in my garden on some pole beans. I had some popcorn planted. The popcorn was up like this. And I'm thinking, I better get my pole beans planted. I was so thankful the rabbits pretty much took all the pole beans because they were going to kill the popcorn, but the rabbits kept eating it down. And finally, the pole beans got one little string away and started growing up the top of the popcorn plant. But I never seen anything come out of the ground as fast as that humic acid, humate-treated seed that I used for those pole beans. So I was excited about that. I started using the product. Anything to beat the weeds and get ahead of them. And here, this farm really isn't this hilly, but when you're a novice at putting a PowerPoint together, this is what you end up with. So that bean here, the one that's up, is about 1.5 inches long, and that's how I measure things in Illinois. Okay, but here's just another picture of the field, and one thing I want to point out is I always noticed this when I took a farm from chemistry, being farmed with chemistry, to biology. You'll notice that soybeans have real long legs. They don't have any leaves get very close to the ground. They don't want to be close to that ground. They're like this, you know, standing on their tippy toes. Could have been also accentuating that is because we had so much rain. But when you have beans that are organic and the soil is healthy, those beans will love that soil and the leaves will be right down practically on the ground. And they shade weeds better that way. And here's my tractor, one of the tractors I cultivate with. It's an 8-row, narrow International 153 that's been altered and customized. It's nothing like a standard cultivator. I got about 3/4 away the field. The first time I got in the field was the day I cultivated, and it was really too wet to be cultivating. I cultivated until I couldn't go anymore. You're talking 82 horsepower tractor on an 8-row cultivator running 4 sweeps between each row. So you got 20 foot of implement behind an 82 horsepower tractor with 16 9 tires on it. It's not, you know, you can't go when it's really wet because you don't have enough traction, enough horse, but you got plenty. That's the way I want my tractor when I cultivate. I want to be able to feel if I got a row plugging or something happening or a gauge wheel comes off, I want to know it because I can feel it on the tractor. These big new tractors, you don't hear the motor pull, you don't feel anything. And I'm kind of old-fashioned in my art of cultivating. But anyhow, I got about 90% down with the field, and then it rained me out, and I let the tractor sit there for a couple weeks and then went back and finished the first time cultivation. But here's after it was cultivated, and see, it's looking pretty nice. I pretty well got things whipped. And at this point in time, if it never allowed me to get in the field again and cultivate, I'm still going to have a crop. Okay? There's nothing out there that's going to cause those beans any real yield reduction, so I'm safe. I've got my insurance behind me. And I'm not talking about multi-peril insurance. I've got my insurance of the fact of getting the crop where it needs to be. This is what the field looked like most of the time after I planted it. It's a pretty good piece of ground, but all the ground around is irrigated, if that tells you anything about the type of soil it is. It's in Mason County, Illinois. And here's just a picture of the tractor. I'll talk later on a slide about when I cultivate, I'm very particular about how everything's done, because I'm traveling 5 miles an hour with, sometimes I'll put it in as close to where there's only 1.5 inches on each side of the row where the sweep wing comes along the row. When you're traveling 5 miles an hour like that, and I rarely ever have a lightning strike, ever. I don't plan to have one. If I cultivate 1,000 acres that year, I don't intend to have one. I don't care if it's hills, hollers, what it is. The secret is if you set your cultivator close enough to the row, you will not go to sleep. Okay? But if you give yourself too much slop, you'll doze off while you're covering that 6 inches with, and I buy cultivators, a lot of old ones to rebuild, and there's like room that a cow could walk through between the two sweeps, And that doesn't work in organic. That real estate next to the row and in the row is a make or break you. And we're going to talk about that later. Okay. Here's just the back, gang. The back of this rod was added on 16 inches. This had been a wide row cultivator, and we pushed it down to a narrow row, so we're running 5 sweeps, that's 4, 5 sweeps between the row. And this is the best technology there's ever been. There's people going to disagree with that. But I've had people come up and say, boy, Gary, what you need is buffalo. And I have nothing. Buffalo has a place. I'm not knocking any company or Orthman. But his fields were always weed patches. Mine weren't. Okay? So always be careful what you listen to and who you listen to. You be the master of your destiny. And there's a little quote I just thought of, as I said, that I'm going to read to you. And I think this is key for all you new people out here. This was a book that was wrote 2,500 years ago. Still pertinent today. It was written by Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Military guide from the 2,500 years ago, not 2,500, 2,500 years ago. Victorious warriors win first, then go to battle. While defeated warriors go to battle first, then seek to win. You need to wrap your brain around this, and you need to have a plan of action. You can't think yourself. This is not learn as you go. You're going to learn as you go, but you got to know what that field needs before it needs it. People call me, and they say, Gary, they're not really working with me, but they know me. They got my phone number. We planted our corn the other day. Should we hoe it? And I'm thinking, well, how long ago was it you hoed it? Oh, about 2 weeks ago. My answer to them is leave the rotary hoe in the shed, get your row crop cultivator ready. That rotary hoe is like me running a 100-yard dash against somebody, and I hire one of you to trip the person running against me twice. Once when they come out of the blocks and once later. And I'm not that fast anymore, but I can beat most people if they get knocked down twice in a 100-yard dash. That's what I'm going to do with the rotary hoe. I'm not going to eradicate the weeds. That's not my purpose with the rotary hoe. My purpose is to make those weeds, instead of being a stage 4 weed, knock them back to a stage 3 or a stage 2 weed, or even a stage 1, or maybe totally clean the field because you aerate the soil, and if those weeds are in the right condition, you'll totally eradicate that weed. They'll be gone. But I don't count on the rotary hoe to clean that crop. A lot of times, they'll thin the grass and weeds out to where they'll be worse than if you'd never rotary hoed at all. When it's as thick as a hair on a dog's back, the weeds and grass will give each other competition, they'll stunt their growth. So you've got lots of weeds and grass that's only a stage 1 rather than thinning it out and having a thick stand, not as thick, but you'll get it to a stage 2, a stage 3 because you thinned it out. So there are exceptions. Here's just another picture of the cultivator, and if you see this one little piece here, I can convert this to a 4-sweep cultivator. If you see that sweep there, I can change things around and put 4 sweeps. This has got the 5th sweep on it for the last cultivation. But the first cultivation, I run 4 sweeps. I want you to learn the concept. I want a double throw of soil to the side of the right side of the row and the left side of the row. You've got to put a backer in place. Here's my point. I raise a lot of sweet corn in my garden. And I've got this little push plow with a big old wheel on front, and it's got this little tiny mow board. And I don't hoe corn with a handheld hoe. I use that little plow to push dirt. It throws dirt up in the row, and I just push it along the row and throw it. And then I come down the other side, and I've got totally clean row of sweet corn. And it's so easy. You don't have to bend over. It's just so easy to do it. And if I don't come another round and put a backer, push dirt up to hold the first dirt that I pushed into the row, over the night and the days ahead and the growth of the corn and the weeds underneath it, it'll push that dirt off. Because it doesn't just go straight down, it goes away and down. Because it's going to go back to where it come from. That's the least resistance. You need a second throw of soil close enough to the first one that you can push that up there and hold that first flow of soil up to the crop. People say, well, gosh, I cultivated it and there wasn't a weed in the field. And I'm thinking, yeah, there was. See? You missed one. It may have been a Jimson weed. It'll get 12 foot tall and be that big around. I'm exaggerating. But I'm far enough from home I can tell stories. You know, and it may have been so tiny you couldn't see it with your bare eye. But it's there. And it can get a ray of sunshine and grow up. Okay? This here is my stubble. I had wheat, and I tried to get wheat field loaded on a video. It's a perfectly clean field of wheat, and this is on the 40. I was transitioning. This is what the stubble looks like before I mowed it. It's got brome grass. People say, brome grass? Orchard grass, Timothy, balanza clover. Balanza clover, you don't plant balanza in organic because it's a weed, you can't control it. I've got yellow sweet clover. You don't do that with wheat. Okay? I got a medium red clover. I got all this stuff in there. I got like 12 species in there. I sow my wheat in the fall with my wheat seed. When I got wheat in the wheat box, I stir in the right amount of grass seed of the brome and the orchard grass and the Timothy and get that sowed in the fall. And that's why we got grass already. There was literally no foxtail in this field. Everybody else that I watched, they've got solid foxtail in their stubble. What happened? Okay? I'm not out there pulling that foxtail. Something's different about the soil chemistry. Okay? And I think it has to do with the little guys in the soil that support all of us, economically and ecologically. Okay? And here's the 70, I call it the Tomlin 70. This is a field that, under the bank management. It's in a trust. The other farm is owned by the kids of the same family, but it wasn't in a trust. That's why they're wanting to sell it. I'm planning on buying it. Once you get it organic, it's a piece of cake. I mean, the difference between organic and it's the difference between like $16,000 or $39,000. Let's see, can I compete with everybody else buying a farm? But anyhow, this here is cereal rye seeded both directions. I'm trying to perfect stage 1 for rolled rye. And there's a lot of people thinking about rolled rye. I'm not going to do it yet because I don't have any trouble with road beans. But it's so important that we win the battle before we get to the battlefield. And I want to perfect step 1, and that's getting an absolute perfect stand of cereal rye that can be rolled. I've already learned I'm not going to cross it. I'm going to do more like this, a 30 and a 30, because when you roll it down, you'll just be better. You won't have one row of soybeans planted right down a row of rye, okay? And it's just going to make it, I think, a better situation, the way it lays over and everything. But see, I'm thinking all the time. You know, other people have the radio blaring and the tractor cabs or whatever, not me. I got plenty of blaring up here, okay? And kind of, you know, I'm kind of like that, okay? But I work this field, like I pointed to you. This is where actually the picture is taken where I was shredding and the stalks and spraying the biological inoculant on. And this is, I'm batting 1,000%. And I have a field day every day. You're welcome anytime to come down. Next year I expect this to be as clean a field of beans as you just saw. Because so far I'm batting 1,000% on getting it prepared. The other field I didn't even get the rye seeded because I didn't get possession of the farm in time. Okay. Now, can you hear this? Can I turn this up, Anders?
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, the first thing I want to cover is how important it is to have the right amount of weight on the front of the tractor for ballasting. This keeps your front tires from slipping back and forth, and a lot of people will fight trying to stay on the road with the cultivator. It's not their fault. Their wheels are moving up here, sliding a little bit, and they don't realize it because the cultivator is always working on that tractor. And then next, we want a tractor with a single rib that's pronounced, sticks out a little farther, so most of your weight is like a rudder on the ground. If you have a flotation tire here, that too is going to let you slip, making it difficult to stay on the road, especially as you get to going faster, because I usually cultivate most ideally about 5 miles an hour. I'm going very slow here because the beans are very small, but we have the grass coming already.
Yes, sir.
Next thing, all the linkages for the steering, you need to renew them and tighten them up. If there's any looseness in anything, replace it, because you don't want to have to sit on that tractor and be jerking back and forth on the steering wheel like this. You want to simply move that steering wheel just tiny little increments to get it to stay on the row. And that can make a big difference in whether you can be successful cultivating or not successful. Also, over here you saw the row guide, and I use a row guide like this, and make sure you've got a long foot on it down here.
Okay.
If it just comes to a point and stops, trust me, it is 5 times more stressful. The longer this is, and I've got another one I use on another tractor that actually comes out in front, but it has to miss the tire.
Yes, sir.
Because that just glides through the beans. Otherwise, all day long, you're seeing those beans fly by the end of this, and it drives you nuts. But with this long, it just kind of like a submarine slides through there, makes it a lot less stressful. You can stay on the row a lot more accurately.
Yes, sir.
And so that's very helpful. And I put it down very low. You have to be careful. I want it right down so I can drive by this bean stem. The leaves may be 3 inches wide, but the stem is where you want to drive by. And this is a point of reference. When I'm on a side hill, I will move it one side or the other of the row so my cultivator doesn't plow that crop.
Yes, sir. I'm going to pause right there.
This tractor here is owned by Crossroads Farms. There are some people, the second farm operation I started working with. The cultivator was put together with my guidance and instruction because when something needs to be done, we find something that makes it happen. And they're great people. They put a lot of work in. It takes 3 cultivators to build one of this type of cultivator to get the principles to happen that I want to have happen. And I was down there. I still cultivate for them. I still want to talk from experience. I don't want, it doesn't take long to lose touch and you forget what it's like for you. And I don't want to be teaching people because you lose that feel of what you have to go through. And so I still cultivate, if at all possible, 1,000 acres a year with a 4 and an 8 row, as well as what I farm on my own. And I love to cultivate. I'd rather cultivate than eat or sleep. It's a tremendous challenge to go out in the field like you saw with the cuckleburs or like that grass and clean it up. Change a field that would normally make 10 bushels an acre, have it make 45 bushels an acre just because you spend a day. Or some corn that might only make 25 bushels an acre and make 140 because you cleaned it up. See, you figure, push the dollars on that, okay? Push the dollars on that. It's worth being out there in the sun. I don't like air. I don't want a cab. I want to be, no obstruction between me and that row and the feel of that cultivator. I want to be able to snap my head back and know exactly. Now, we're working on RTK, so you're going to be seeing a 12-row outfit here in a little bit. But here's the next video, and after we play this, and we can have some questions. I want the back tires as narrow as possible. These are 15.5 38s. I've also got a tractor with 16.9 38s, and they've got the same footprint. It's just wider through here. And that allows you to have loose dirt between the tire and the row because your first sweep comes along and it's throwing this loose dirt to the row rather than slabs. The tire compacts the ground, causing it to slab. So if you plant with a 15.5 tire and you rotary hoe with a 15.5 tire, then you've still got plenty of loose dirt here to work with. Otherwise, it's difficult to cover up weeds and not the crop because... So
you want small rubber on all of it, not just the cultivator.
That's right.
Makes sense.
Yes. And getting back to the cultivator, your guides are very important.
Yes, sir.
Make sure they're tight. There's no wiggle back and forth hardly at all in these.
Yep.
Okay. And make sure they have the diameter they need. This in here is worn quite a bit, but it still goes in deep enough that it holds me true. This holds you on side hills. Also, it keeps it from back and forth sliding as you go through the field, as one side of the cultivator may start pulling more than the other one.
Is that an international specific or is that an aftermarket one that you've mounted?
No, this is international specific.
Yes, sir.
On a 6-row, there's one on each end, and you want one on each end.
Okay.
Okay, and I set this spring tension so it shoves that in the ground and runs about this deep. You can see how it's shiny here.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that's vital. Also, a mistake that most people make, they think they should keep the sway blocks down to where the cultivator is fastened tight behind the tractor.
Not so.
Not so. You want it to move freely behind the tractor when it wants to.
Now, how much so in this case? You're
Quite a few inches. There's probably 8 inches to a foot that the cultivator can swing back and forth. And back, because right here these arms have plenty of room.
Yeah, so you're not set tight at all.
That's right.
All right,
Don't want it tight at all. You can align your cutter wheels. It's best if they both toe in just a very little bit. And the way you align that,
guys, I see that here,
is you come through here with a string and tape it here and come out front with that string, and you can see when you've got it flush against your blade.
And you can even see right here, you have a little bit of a toe in, like
Exactly.
you said.
I would bring it out here and put a nail in the ground or a brick on it if you're in a shed, and I'd do both sides.
Yes, sir.
Then you measure from the front of this to the front of that one over there, and then you go measure your strings, how far they are apart. That lets you know if you got a little, you just want a little toe in. This tape was kind of a serendipity. I had a young man named Jared Silverling. He's from up Madison here. I thought maybe he might be here today. He came down and he kept calling me. He wanted to come down and watch me cultivate. And I tell you what, when I'm on the cultivator, boy, I don't like not cultivating when it's fit to cultivate. And but he's got a small farm that he's going to be farming, and so he come down and he taped me. And here's a guy with a passion. He wants to learn how to cultivate. He was asking the right questions, and he was leading me into answering the questions. And the tapes were so good that I've used them a couple times. Let me ask you this. I don't know what group we've got here. Are all of you RTK, guidance, big tractors, or a lot of times there's people in the room that farm with horses yet, and there's people in the room that farm 20,000 acres. And so is this helping anybody? Is it helping anybody? Okay. Because, I mean, there is such a broad... One day I'm on a tractor that's 300 and some horse with guidance. The next day I'm on a tractor that like this, you know, and so it varies. But do you have any questions about these two that I played at all? And I'll play the next one if you don't. Okay? Yes, sir?
How wide are your sweeps?
I run on the front usually a full 8-inch. These have got the 3/4 sweep turned around to where the wings towards the row, because I do that, and I'll explain that in one of the tapes. But I run 8 inches next to the row. They're the first line of defense. They're going to knock the weeds down in combination with the blade. Okay? The next sweep is a 10-inch, and it's running fairly flat, so it doesn't cover up crop. I'll play the next slide. Is there any more questions? Yes, sir?
Just curious, are you using all sweeps, or do you ever use like a Williston rolling cultivator basket at all?
You know, I haven't, but I used them back when I was on the farm working back when I was probably 18 years old. Williston has its place. I wished I had a time in the shop to revamp it to my liking, because the Williston as a whole, I'm not happy with. The Williston Spider, yes, absolutely. But see, I cultivate too close. When you're getting in there that close on each side of that row, you can't have something that's back there going like this because the pipe's so long on a Williston. I'd mount it on a 153 International or something, or RG, or even one of the newer models of John Deere and International it would work on. Then I'd get it spot on. It'd be fabulous for young soybeans, because you get the speed, you wouldn't have the slabbing or anything. So I'm looking forward to someday having a time when I retire, I'll do that. Next thing, I run my sweeps a little closer than most people. That there's probably about 5 inches, 2.5 inches on each side. I think that's important. You need to be in close to your work. It's like, you know, you can shoot an elk if you're elk hunting with a double-aught buckshot with a shotgun that's 2 miles away. You're not going to do much to it. Okay? But if you get a high-powered rifle, so you've got to have, this here is my bullets. This here's my bullets. This is what I'm going to shoot the weeds and grass with. Okay? So the consistency of this is important, so how I till the field's vital to me too.
Okay.
And then I want my work close, because if I'm going to shoot a mouse with my 22, I want to be real close.
So you actually have, most of the times you see the cut wing near the crop, you run yours.
The reason it's that way is I improvise. A year ago, I had them turned the other way. This one should be over here, based on what the manufacturer said, but I wanted to reach in underneath my fender and get closer and still have plenty of space here. Now I've got 8-inch sweeps that I normally run.
Yes, sir.
But this was set up this way, and it works that way, so we went to the field and started cultivating.
So you got 8, and then, but now what are these ones?
These are about a 7-inch, 3/4-inch sweep.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
And I've cultivated more acres with a 3/4 sweep than any other size sweep. But I've learned, back when we farmed years ago, we had different springs. Now we're having so much organic matter it doesn't get broke down, because a lot of times we don't get in the field to work and get the rye knocked down and worked in. So the more space you can get here, the better.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I started putting a full 8-inch on, and that gives me more space for flow right there.
Okay, we'll play the next one. I'm traveling about 5 miles an hour here, and I'm the one filming with the camera. I was also driving a tractor. I didn't think I could pull that off, but I made quite a bit of films like that where I was filming. Any questions? Yeah. Yes, sir.
What operations did you do on that field before you cultivated?
It would have been rotary hoed twice. Yes.
What stages?
Probably on the 4th day and the 8th day. You know, I don't exactly have that record in front of me, but as a general rule, we're going to rotary hoe on the 4th day. If it's going to rain on the 4th day, we rotary hoe on the 3rd day. Okay? And then if we rotary hoe on the 3rd day, then 4 more days from that date. And if it's going to rotary hoe 4 more days from that day, then we're going to hoe the 3rd day from that day. I would rather hoe twice in 6 days, okay, because all I want is to give that crop a little jump and get ahead in the race with those weeds. Makes it easier for me to set the cultivator. If I've cultivated so many fields where, let me tell you, the weeds and grass are the same size. And that's where I learned how to cultivate real close. You know, when you set it into where you only have 1.5 inches to 1 3/4 inches for that crop to go through on each side, it was not that hard, because not my crops. But anyhow, it was that or the crop was gone. And you'd be surprised how you can just rip those weeds. And I'd leave the fenders on too, because they compress the soybeans and put all the leaves up, and you rip real close to them, and then the leaves come back out, and if you missed a weed, it shades the weed. And so it's amazing what you can do when you learn how to use one of these. So it's worth your time to really put some time into learning. Any other questions about that one? Yes, sir.
The field looks pretty flat, so what are you doing in an area where you got a fair amount of slope?
You know, when I farmed back in the 80s, I had terraces that I had to hold the uphill wheel tire, the brake on, and keep it from spinning out. And so, and around corner, they were terraces that weren't necessarily parallel contours or anything. They were real steep and small terraces. And you can, it just, here again, you have to learn to adjust for the slope and the turns and everything. And you do, if you do it enough, you get so you can. That's the brilliant thing about being an embryonic being. And that's why we're so far ahead of the weeds and grass, because we have something they don't have. We're a higher being. And that's the exciting thing about it. This up here is by far and beyond better than a GPS unit that sets, that little yellow thing that sets on the cab, okay? That keeps us from having to use this, okay? That's a wonderful thing. It's like, oh, when you got one, because I cultivate with that too. But it's amazing with practice what you can do with this here, if you have the right tool to use, where the steering's good, the tractor's user-friendly.
Do you have any issues if you have like a 4-inch rain that comes in the next day? You know, if you got a fair amount of slope, losing much soil?
With the rotation, you're leaving 1 full year of alfalfa, and now, because I don't have livestock, it all goes to feed my livestock in the soil. I don't take any hay off. You'll be surprised how that soil gets like potting soil. Dramatically, in the earthworm holes, when you get 12 to 20 earthworms in the soil, that rain just sucks right into the soil. And if raindrops go in the soil where they land, they don't cause erosion. Okay? It's when they hit here and have to go over here and run down a ditch somewhere that they take soil with them. But if the water soaks in where it lands, that's the way we stop erosion. You got a question, sir?
I'm very interested in rolled rye and soybeans, but I can see times, like without having a good enough stand, where I'm gonna wanna go in and cultivate, and I'll have, even a failed rolled rye stand might have way more residue than you're dealing with your cultivator. Can I go in there with one of the modern, big flats,
Yes.
clean out the middles, throw some to the edge?
Sure you can, and that's the downside when you have all that organic matter. It blocks the flow of that soil coming in. And here's the thing, guys. If you're going to do the roll rye, and I personally tell you the truth, I will not outlive the usefulness and the need for the row crop cultivator. But in the future, we're going to be farming using plants to control our weeds and to till our soil. That's coming. The handwriting's on the wall. It makes no sense to throw all this energy to grow energy, okay? And they're going to find crops better than rye to grow, and they'll have things for corn, because we're an intelligent people. It's amazing. We haven't even started yet to scratch the surface. But if it's a go, no-go decision. If you don't have the stand of rye you need, don't go, okay? That is vital to get step one. Don't have a hope where you just hope for the best. There's no hope for the best in this business, in my opinion. So get better at getting that stand of rye perfected, even if you have to go to great pains to drill it or a certain couple ways or whatever. I would highly recommend that. Yes, sir. Walter?
Yeah, just the setup that you've got with your shanks there, could you go over that and how you don't get things to plug up?
I think the next, it's later on, but good point. I'm glad you brought that up. I'll play another one here. Okay, let me play. This is just a picture. That's how wide we're running. And then the next slide, I think, is the last slide, and it answers your question, Walter. Do we have any questions about this here? Yes, ma'am.
Do you set your sweeps and your wheel tracks any deeper?
No, I try to set all the sweeps identical. The whole secret to this system is that when you're setting it up, and I had one slide that covered this, but I didn't put it in, I want to go 5 miles an hour. My dad taught me how to cultivate, and he says, Gary, you get that cultivator set on a flat surface, and you set the back sweeps flat. The ones next to the row you toe down a certain way, and that answers a little bit of Walter's question, okay? And then you go to the field, and you set your tractor to go 5 miles an hour. And you set the cultivator so you can go 5 miles an hour. You don't set your speed to make the cultivator happy. I'm going 5 miles an hour, and I'm going to figure a way to set that cultivator so I can, so you get the blast in there, the blasting motion in there. Did that answer your question? I forgot what your question was now.
Oh, whether you have to set it any deeper in the wheel track?
No, I try to set them all the same. Okay. Yes, sir.
If you're cultivating a bean crop, then it doesn't sound like you had or maybe you did have a corn crop right ahead of it, but if you had a 200 bushel corn crop, you find that you're limiting yourself in the day that you're cultivating to later on in the day because of dew in the morning, not allowing the crop to flow through, or can you get going at an early time?
You know, because of the conditions we've had, I've cultivated in the rain. I've cultivated, it's a shameful, some of the things we've had to do to salvage a crop because of raining and just start raining and not stop. But we've really got these farms to where our corn's producing 170, and we're not talking about an expensive fertilizer program. And our beans are 45 to 60 and stuff, so we're real happy with it, where we're getting. But no, I don't pay much attention to whether there's a dew on anymore. If I can go, I go. Okay? Yes, sir.
Is there a reason why you use the cutoff sweeps there? Why wouldn't you just use a full sweep there?
Well, they were on the cultivator, and I was down the back bad, and they were set close enough to do, and they did the job, and it gives you the option where you can flop them back to where they're supposed to be and change for maybe a second cultivation, and you're getting farther away from the root system. So normally I'd have put an 8-inch on, but they were brand new, and if you put a brand new sweep on, it may chunk up and bring up bigger chunks of soil, and then it changes the way that thing works. I got one more to play. I'll answer one more question.
Curious about, you've got sliding shields on there. Have you ever used rolling shields?
I wouldn't have a set of them, but I appreciate the question. Those blades are the secret to some of my madness, okay? The beauty of the blades is I set them wider in front, okay? So if there's a weed here, it starts shoving that weed and folding it into the row, and it lays other weeds up like dominoes, okay? There's a wall of soil blasting in underneath it. And what pops out the back is nothing but the beans, because they're bing, 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 right in a row. They give each other support. And the back of the fenders almost touch, just leaving room for the soybean to slide through. Without the blades, you lose that's like a 1-2-3 punch with the first flow of soil, the blades shoving things down, and then the second flow of soil back and being a backer.
So your shields then are set just slightly above dirt level at that point?
No, really, I set them about 1/3 down on the plant.
Okay.
Yeah. If you were to level the dirt, if it's shoving the dirt up, making it look like they're closer. But no, I want, if I got to cover up everything but the top little leaves of the bean to clean that crop, I'll do it. I guarantee you it'll never hurt that crop, okay? I'm going to play the one last one. I'm sure this is the last one.
Talking about these shields being a nuisance. They're the magic of the system, but they're the biggest pain of the system also, and that's why a lot of people just threw them away. They just despise these fenders. A lot of it's because they didn't know how to use them properly. If you set them properly, if you know it's wider at the front than the back.
Yes, sir.
So if something comes in here, if it can make it past here, it can fit through there.
Yes, sir.
But if I turn them so they're straight, then it will wedge here. More will wedge. Also, this sweep is towed down. It's pointing down. So the dirt comes up here and it boils. It rolls here.
Yes,
and
sir.
so if something gets stuck in here, it pushes it out, and it usually lands over here and it goes on through. See, so there's secrets to setting it up. I want to make it so it doesn't wedge by making this concave, convex, whatever you want to call it, so that anything that goes past here will still fit through there, because this is wider than the distance from here to where this would meet. And it also helps your crop funnel in. So if you get off the road a little bit, it just bends this one way, and if you get off the other way, it bends it the other way, and it doesn't cover it up. It still protects it.
Yes, sir. And then I see in the back, your other sweeps, you're running at a shallower angle.
Yes, I want them flat, because otherwise they don't have a shield to protect the dirt from going over the row. So I want to run flat so the dirt just kind of goes out horizontally. Now I run a 4 sweep system because I want a double throw of soil. This sweep here throws soil first, but over the course of night and the days ahead, this soil gravity will pull it away, letting the weeds come back up through. So I want to back that flow up with another flow, and then it secures the situation so that the weeds can't get back out. When you have big weeds, the first sweep will knock down the weed. The second sweep covers it up. Now, as slow as I'm going today, you're not going to see that action. Right. But when you're going anything over 3.5 miles an hour, that back sweep will push that soil over to the row.
Now I see you do have some of your sweeps up today. Can you talk a little bit about?
This cultivator, ultimately we put it together to have 5 sweeps.
Yes, sir.
But we found that the best way to do it is, for me, I do the first cultivation with this cultivator, is to focus on cleaning the real estate in the row. That's the money maker. Anybody can run a cultivator and plow out the centers. Okay? It's learning how to throw dirt that covers up weeds but doesn't cover up crop.
Right. So you're on your second cultivation, you're going to put these down, you're going to clean out the center. It's right now where you're making your money are these 12.
That's right.
Yep.
There's 12, that's right, 12. There's 2 sides to each row. And it's important to get the right amount of dirt thrown to each one.
I paid a lot of money to get a master's in mathematics, and that's about all I can do.
That's right. Okay, but we use a single sweep on most of the farms now, like a Buffalo or a Heiniger, because they're so simple to adjust and anybody can run them, and then we just plow out that center.
Cool.
And it works really well.
I have one more, but we don't need to play it if there's questions, because I think we're out of time. We're right at a couple more minutes. A couple more minutes, okay. Have any questions? Or you want me to play? Yes, sir.
Well, I'm really not cultivating, but like when you were talking about your crop rotation, you would go leave the hay fallow here, then What do you do in the spring to get rid of that hay?
Well, that's fun. We usually use a offset plowing disc. Now, with the little farm I've got and the little tractors I'm just going to pull a 14-foot tandem disc set up with notched blades. I'm going to pull a shredder ahead of it and shred the alfalfa down, because if I can, I'll try to get that alfalfa knee to waist high. So I'm putting back as much as I can in the swell. And I'm going to shred it right ahead of it. The disc is pulled behind the shredder, and I'm just going to scratch the surface a little bit, just go probably about as deep as the notches in the blades. And that throws a little dirt, gets some biology started on that green stuff I've just put in the soil to get the biology come alive. And I don't care if the alfalfa comes back up and greens up again. I think that if you make the alfalfa mad, all plants in nature are designed like we are to defend their territory, and they put off more allelopathic effect if you make them mad. And that alfalfa is going to feel threatened a little bit, so we make it mad working it once, then we're going to work it a second time on an angle with the plying disc again. And then by that time you got it in pretty good shape. And here again, I'm going to space the workings so it just seems to work better when you get in groundwork, to let Mother Nature help you with the breakdown of the soil and the organic matter. And once you get a field cultivator through it, if you take good care of your field cultivator and make sure you haven't got slops in your shank, you know, the shanks are rigid enough, because a lot of cultivators get wore out and they'll snake around, the sweep will snake around. But if you only work that ground that deep and there's an alfalfa root big around as your thumb growing out of the ground, and you come along with a cultivator sweep, it'll shear that baby right off. And then it'll get mud right around where that base of that alfalfa plant is, and that's why I never run out of moisture. I can work my alfalfa late in the year and ground be real dry when I'm working it, and you're taking a lot of moisture out of the ground with that crop of alfalfa growing out there. But if you never work below that depth and then you shave those off with the field cultivator, the moisture keeps coming up like underground irrigation, and you can dig down in that loose layer. I'm creating a dust mulch, by the way. I forgot to mention a dust mulch. That's key in having a clean crop. You don't get it every year. But you'll have a lot of moisture around those alfalfa roots you cut off because they're still pumping moisture up. Same as if you go walk beans and you cut a pigweed off or any weed and you come back the next day, it's wet and muddy around, on the driest, hottest day of the year, it can be wet and muddy around that stub of that plant root, that stub of the weed. Alfalfa is the same way. So I've always had moisture pumped up to my crop. I like to think of planting corn as transplanting a corn plant on the top of that alfalfa, because it's bringing up nutrients, it's bringing up water. And it's amazing, I've never failed to get a crop out of the ground because it didn't have any moisture. So, but that answer your question?
Yeah, well, I have one more then. So you could actually just leave that field in alfalfa for 1 year and basically leave it fallow?
Yes.
And I guess you make up enough in the next 3 years?
Well, number one, I like beating up the marketers and the processors and the buyers. Let me tell you something. You never want to trust anybody with your future, because nobody cares as much about it as you do. And I try to get as much for my grain from my guys as I can. They're my people, okay? And so I usually can beat the buyers, a lot of the buyers, by $2 on marketing. And I can encourage all of you, the best thing we can do with O-Farm and all the people that market and buy grain is let's get corn up to $20 a bushel. They'll make more money, we'll make more money. We all win. But guess what? They're not going to come to you and say, hey, you'll take 13, I want to give you 15. It ain't going to happen. It's up to us to stand our ground. I'm not talking about any kind of a union or anything like that, but know that you're worth something, and knowing your crop's worth something. You go to Walmart, you buy a bag of organic chips, they're going to cost you $448 a bushel. I sold our white corn this year for 13 FOB, food grade. Now, somewhere between $13 and $448, if they paid us $26 instead of $13, it would probably cause that $448 that $3.99 8¼ ounce bag of chips would cost them $4.03. I'm not buying it that we're not worth more. Okay, so don't ever trust. Trust but verify. Always call 5 people before you sell any crop. Call me. I'll tell you what I'm getting. Okay? Let's keep guys on their toes out here marketing our products. Let's don't trust anybody. You verify. Because for how many years have the farmers been taken advantage of? You got to get good. So I went back with marketing. I'm not going to milk my farm and deplete it down to nothing and rob and rape my farm, okay, to cover for poor deal making, okay? Anybody agree with what I'm saying? Okay? I love everybody I work with. The buyers should buy it as cheap as they can buy it. That's their job, okay? I've been on both sides of the fence. They're doing their job and they do it well, okay? Applaud them when they win a dollar one way, okay? And I'm happy for them. But I'm going to make sure that the fox isn't guarding the chicken coop with my business and my future, and I don't want you to either. Keep everybody honest. They'll be better for it, and so will you.
All right, I think we got to wrap it.
Thank you.